We're recording this, so please be on your best behavior. Scorsese, yeah? Good to go. All right. Welcome, welcome, welcome. My name is Eli Saltzman. I'm the director of the Gillenhorn Institute for Israel Studies, and it's a pleasure and honor to present today's speaker. Dr. Oded Adomi Leshem is a senior research associate at the Psychology of Intergroup Conflict and Reconciliation Lab and the Harry S. Truman Research Institute for the Advancement of Peace, both housed in the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. Located at the nexus of political psychology and conflict resolution, his research explores how beliefs about the future shape political attitudes and behaviors of people mired in conflict. Dr. Leshem is also interested in the formation and transformation of political attitudes and ideologies during violent conflicts. Thus, apart from his focus on advancing theories in conflict resolution and political psychology, a key aspect of his research agenda is to design and test psychological interventions aimed at conflict transformation. Dr. Leshem's work has been published in journals such as PNAS, Political Behavior, and the Journal of Conflict Resolution. His most recent book, entitled Hope Amid Conflict, Philosophical and Psychological Explorations, was published by Oxford University Press, available on Amazon, and I think there's a coupon for a discount or something, no?
I think so, yeah.
There's going to be one if you wish.
Yeah, but
we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. No. It's funny because it's the first time that I saw the actual print was 2 days ago at my friend's. I don't even have copies. But I'll talk about
what I understand now, reading between the lines, is we all get free copies. Alrighty. Oded, the floor is yours.
Okay, so Eli, thank you so much for the introduction and for arranging this event. And we're going to, I'll give just, even before the background, I'll give some notes because we planned this event before the war started. And it was obvious for me and Eli that, it's not going to be a regular book launch, and I'm not going to focus solely on my research from the book. What I want to do, and because also the content of the book and the content of the things I research and teach has very much to do with conflict and what's going on now in Israel, in the Palestinian territories, I want to devote the first maybe 20 minutes, 30 minutes, something like that, to understand a little bit what's going on, okay? To make sense, not from the news, we all read news and follow the news, but both from a perspective of a resident of the region. I flew in the US 4 days ago, and I live in Tel Aviv, so I live and experience this war, but also from the perspective of a political psychologist. So I'm a political psychologist. Political psychologists it's kind of a hybrid between political science and social psychology. And what we try to do is understand the psychological origins of political phenomena and processes. So I am interested in the set of beliefs and emotions and perceptions that make people engage in violent conflicts. And unfortunately, I also live in an area which is, filled with this violence, has been for many years, and of course now even more so. So we're going to do that, and then we're going to talk about the book, but you'll see that there is a lot of connection. And you could ask clarification questions during the talk, but maybe we'll leave more substantial discussions to the end of the talk. So just a little bit about myself. My name is Oded Adomi Leshem. I'm a senior research associate at the Hebrew University in a place called the Psychology of Intergroup Conflict and Reconciliation Lab. So I'm a political psychologist. I am a conflict scholar as well. And I've also been engaged for many, many years and still am engaged in peace and conflict resolution activities in Israel and the Palestinian territory. So I also come from that point of view. And Many people ask me, are you still going to talk about the book now that the war is on? Hope seems irrelevant. Hope seems, you could be cynical. Hope now while people are dying, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't connect. But actually, what I discovered through my studies is that hope becomes actually more relevant, the bleaker the situation is. And you could think about, it's not like a good analogy is to think about light of a candle. If the room is well lit, it's full of daylight, you light a candle, its light is insignificant, right? It's marginal. But if the room is dark, suddenly this small light, this small flame becomes relevant, becomes significant, becomes meaningful. And actually, the darker the room is, the more meaningful this small light. So this is kind of an analogy. This is how hope works, okay? And you'll see through the conversation why actually it's very, very relevant to talk about hope, especially in these circumstances. So I'll start by kind of looking at what's happening here. And I would say that we are now experiencing the worst episode in the history of the conflict, and if you look in terms of the history of the Jewish people, probably the worst episode since the Holocaust. So this is a very, very intense episode, and just a little bit briefly about the history, quickly about the history of the place. This is the Gaza Strip. This is the border with Egypt. This is Israel here. Currently there are 2.4 million Palestinians living in the Gaza Strip. This is one of the most densely populated places in the world, second only to Hong Kong and Singapore and, very thriving cities. So this is, and of course Gaza is not, okay? So very, very densely populated. Until 1967, hello. Hi, welcome. So until 1967, this was Egyptian territory. All this place was Egyptian territory. And in 1967, in the Six-Day War, Israel conquered the Gaza Strip and all of the Sinai Peninsula, which is here. It's also important to say that from these 2.4 million people, 2/3 are Palestinian refugees. That means that these are Palestinians that lived in the area which is now in Israel. They ran away, they left, they were expelled, depending on your point of view. But 2/3 of them are refugees and actually descendants of refugees, of course. And the rest are original inhabitants of this region. And then in 1967, Israel conquered the Gaza Strip, and several years later also started to settle there. So there were civilian settlements inside of the Gaza Strip. This is where Gush Katif was, and there were other places here and here. Civilian settlements, towns, moshavs in this area, about 8,000 people. But then in 2005, Israel decided to disengage from Gaza, unilaterally decided to pull out both the civilians and the military troops that were there. And from 2005, there are no Israelis or no military inside. But a year later, a year after the disengagement, the Hamas militants took over the control of the Gaza Strip. And in response, Israel started a blockade, okay? So actually no one leaves the Gaza Strip, okay? Or it's very, very rare to be able to leave the Gaza Strip for Palestinians. And there's a blockade here, and of course, along the sea. So think about that the Gazian people, this 2.4 million, are, in many ways caged, have been caged for more than a decade now, okay? Almost 2 decades. So that's a very, very long time. And from 2006, 2007, about once every 2 or 3 years, sometimes it's less, sometimes it's more, there are like violent confrontations between the Hamas and also there's Islamic Jihad people over there and Israel. Rockets are flying from here into Israel, and Israel is attacking, usually by Air Force, the Gaza Strip. And there were all sorts of big episodes. I don't know the names in English of the operations, but all of them kind of lasted, 5 weeks or 4 weeks. Many Gazans killed in these confrontations, and also Israelis. But this time, this is something I would say different, not only in terms of the scale, but also in terms of the type of violence. So what happened on the 7th of October is that the Hamas militants, also jihadists and others, they planned it well in advance. They managed to break the fence and go in about 10 or 11 places, go inside. About 3,000 militants went inside and went into the many moshavs and kibbutzes over there. They reached also Ofakim here and other places, also here in the north, and massacred about 1,100 people in one day. And the cruelty of the violence is unheard of. Cruel, massacring kids, elderly, without distinction, very cruel methods, and you probably heard and know. But in terms of the scope of the violence, this again is unprecedented, and the only thing that people, of course, think about is the Holocaust. So the cruelty of violence is again unparalleled, but also the number of casualties, 1,100 in Israel, and as we count now, about 12,000 Gazians, most of whom are civilians, lost their lives in the last 4 weeks. This is a very, very, very big number. And again, children, women, etc., many civilians, also militants, okay, but also civilians. So also the numbers are very, very high. And onto that you also add the issue of the hostages. So hostages, again, civilians, the youngest one is I think 9 or 10 months old. There were also elderly people, many teenagers, 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, kids, men, women, everything. 240 were captured and taken into the Gaza Strip, and the militants, they have tunnels underneath the Gaza Strip, and they are there, their whereabouts are unknown. Also important, there was a big rave party, okay? People that know these trance parties, they are Israelis known for these parties. 4,000 people were in these parties, listening to music, having fun. 6:30 in the morning, Hamas came in, killed many. About 400 of the victims are from the party, and captured others. Okay, so and most of the people are again from the hostages are from the kibbutzes and moshav in this area and from that party. This is unparalleled. The depth of the violence, it's a very big mess. And this is also important to understand that it is on a different level from other confrontations or wars that Israel had. Because even in other wars, when there were casualties, this is kind of a war between the military and other militaries, right? And this scenario of the enemy breaking the fence and massacring civilians and taking hostages was an unheard of scenario. In many ways, the reason for Israel to be established is that these scenarios won't happen. So unfortunately, it is acceptable that sometimes there are wars and there are soldiers and other armies, but this idea from the perspective of Israelis, and I think Jews around the world, that this kind of scenario will happen, makes Israelis and also Jews feel helpless. Because this was not supposed to happen. The whole idea of the state of Israel is that these things will not happen. So this is a state of helplessness and also humiliation. Israel is supposed to have a very, very strong army with high-tech, technologies and intelligence and everything. This was, no one knew that is what was going to happen. The military, I will talk about a little bit, responded very badly in the first 2 days. So civilians needed to fight, themselves and other people. The military was not there, right? Israel is, strong and famous military, with all the technology and the capabilities, helpless. So this is also there is a feeling of humiliation. And later on I'll talk a little bit about this emotion of humiliation, because, as a political psychologist, we study emotions, and we know, for example, that anger and fear, which are negative emotions, could lead under some circumstances also to positive outcomes. When we're angry, we want to change the situation, we go to demonstrate, we do something about the situation. When we are humiliated, when people are humiliated, it doesn't matter if it is Israelis, Palestinians, or other, they want to retaliate and hurt the other, regardless of the consequences. Okay? And of course, there is a larger regional context, because there's also tensions on the north with Hezbollah. This is an Iranian-backed militia, Hezbollah. And missiles are flying from Yemen to the south of Israel in Eilat. Eilat is somewhere here. Okay? So suddenly these external threats that Israel didn't think that it would start, suddenly, all fronts are attacked. This is the larger regional context. And I don't have to tell you about the ripple effects around the world. You see it here in Washington, you see it in capitals around in Europe, you see it on campuses, you're either pro-Israeli or you're pro-Palestinian. Really, this event kind of divided the world into these two parts, right? And I'm going to talk a little bit about it. Now, if this isn't enough, everything is also in the context of what was happening before Israel, where there was a lot of discontent between the citizens of Israel and Israel's government, current government. So, since this government was elected, this was November a year ago, and started to work in 1st of January, there has been a huge civil movement against the government, because the government was pushing for anti-democratic laws and anti-democratic policies, etc. And people started, hey, this is going like breaking Israel apart. And this movement grew and grew and grew, and there were demonstrations with hundreds of thousands of people each Saturday night and other activities against this government, claiming that the government is dysfunctional and it's all about, it's corrupt, etc. And suddenly this broke out. And the government did not respond well, and still is not responding well to the situation. So, a little bit about the public sentiment, and I'm going to talk, before that I want to talk about a little bit, Paul asked me before that to talk a little bit about what's going on in Israel in terms of the atmosphere. How do people feel? And I live in Tel Aviv, but during these 4 weeks I traveled all around the country. I was in the south, also in the vicinity of the Gaza Strip, in Jerusalem. I teach at the Hebrew University, in other places. So you could say it's a mixture of many emotions. First of all, great sadness. Many people know people who lost their lives, who were injured. Since the attack, also IDF soldiers, both reserved and younger soldiers, were killed and injured. So a lot of sadness, and of course concern, great concern for the hostages. Really, everybody is feeling this concern in his gut. Second, something that I'm concerned of, very kind of the nationalistic sentiments are rising. People are becoming extreme in their nationalistic ideas, right? Because of this blow, because of this attack, we talked about humiliation. People want to revenge, people want to retaliate, and this is also something that we see. And the third is a huge level of uncertainty. People don't know where this is going, both in terms of the military operation in Gaza, the future of the refugees, and the government that still many people think are responsible for this mess. Now they're also holding the helm, right? They are leading this country perhaps into another catastrophe. So great levels of uncertainty, and the atmosphere is bad, okay? And you see it all around, you see it in the streets, you see it in how people react. And I'm going to talk about that and give you some, but I'm also going to talk about hope. Don't forget this to talk about this lecture is about hope, okay? So again, public sentiment, there is this sense of bewilderment. This is true in Israel and also around the world. What happened? What just happened now? Right? There is kind of disorientation. And what do people do when they are disoriented? They try, in terms of their psyches, they try to hold on to the most simple and nearest and available thing. And so the perspectives become simplistic, right? Pro-Israeli, pro-Palestinian. There's no shades. Welcome. Hello. There are no shades, there are no complex thinking. There is no complex thinking because people are so, it's like the rug was pulled under their feet. So you need to hold on to something. What do you hold on? To your identity, your kinship, right? What group do you belong to? Israel, pro-Israeli? Okay, you're here. You're pro-Palestinian? You're here. Okay, and then people are divided in Israel, of course, and around the world, in Israel and Palestine and around the world, right? Also, there's this phenomenon of rally around the flag. What does that mean? Right now, in Israel, we don't discuss our differences, right? We all are now for for that war effort, and we rally around the flag. This could be a good thing, but this also has negative ramifications. Like I said, nationalism is on the rise, radicalism inside of Israel, religious radicalism is on the rise in Israel, and there's what's called a competitive victimhood. The competitive victimhood, as you see, the Israelis are showing how much they were victimized. They show these awful images of the brutality of the murders and the massacres, right? And the same Palestinians, they are showing their kids that are now killed in the Gaza Strip. So everybody's like a competition. The problem with this competition is that if you are competing who's more a victim, you cannot acknowledge the fact that the other group has also something, because it's a competition. If you acknowledge, you lose points, right? So we see here a total unacknowledgement, both from Palestinians, that would not acknowledge the horrific attacks of the 7th of November, and Israelis who do not acknowledge and they have no empathy towards those civilians that are killed in the Gaza Strip. So, like I said, it's a mess. And the last thing, hope. Right? People lose hope. And as I explained, hope has two dimensions. The first dimension is the dimension of desires, what we aspire for, what we dream of. And the second is the expectation, how much we believe these desires and dreams can come true. But there is a loss of both these things. You see people very hopeless. Can we find hope? I'm going to give you two examples of hope right now in Israel. The first is that something really beautiful, sometimes out of the ashes and the rubble and the catastrophe, you see the good, suddenly the positive sides of people. So what happened, I told you about the protest movement, right, for democracy. On several hours after the attack, the leaders of the big protest organizations said, okay, we're going, and they had a huge apparatus of, all these demonstrations. There brought hundreds of thousands of people, and there were a lot of activities. They said, we're going to take all of that. our volunteers, all our members, all our capacity for networking and communications and money, and devoted to support the home front and the battlefront. And it took one day, and you know in Israel we use WhatsApp a lot. Do you guys use WhatsApp? Okay, we use WhatsApp a lot. Okay, I'm in I don't know, hundreds of groups, right? So we in the protest movement, and about half of the Israelis are in somewhere or another were in the protest movement. They were changed, you know, to all sorts of initiatives. So for example, one day, so on Sunday, they said, okay, all you guys, there are many civilians living in the vicinity. We need to take them out, not in the battle zone, but we need to take them out. Families that they don't have, there's no public transportation, they can't move. Okay, who wants to do it? I have a family of 2 people in Ofakim, New Ofakim. And you say, okay, you put kind of a like, that means you're taking the ride, and you go and take people. And I was, on Sunday, so either taking people from there, or because Israel recruited 350,000 reservists for the military service, they didn't also have any transportation. So I drove to Dimona in Beersheba, like 2.5 hours from Tel Aviv, taking the soldiers to their base in the north. Not me, like me, 50,000 people. That's what we did, okay? This is private initiatives from, you know, just people. This is people, not an organization, not the military, not the government. This is people forming together and doing a lot of stuff. So we moved people from place to place. We fed the military for the first 2 weeks. There was no food for the military because the amount of reservists were so high. I went with my kids, for example. All the restaurants in Tel Aviv and everywhere in Israel changed. Instead of serving people, they started to prepare food, pack it. And I went with my kids and we were packing food for 2 days. And then people, again, on these WhatsApp groups, just a car comes. Okay, you are going to that base, you have 200 meals for the, okay, you go. And people like that, you know, this was very, very strong, very powerful. People opened kindergartens and schools for the people that were evacuated. I volunteered for about a week at the headquarters of the missing persons and hostages. A lot of all this area near the Gaza Strip is a very fertile agricultural land, but all the fields were, you know, tomatoes were rotting because there were no people, so people come and so all of this was happening, is still happening as we speak. And this means that civil society replaced the government. Currently, Israel is functioning because of civil society. And this is very powerful. This is a good thing that came out of this, okay? And the second thing is that still peace activists, even those that live in the vicinity of the area, start to talk about peace again. For many years, this was kind of a non-issue. But now, people like Maoz Zinon, he lost his dad and mom in the attack. They live in Nativa Asara. They were murdered in the attack. He said, this only proves that managing the conflict, right, like keeping it as such and trying to lower the flame, it won't help, it won't work. We need a real solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict that needs to be done by leaders, not in any military force. Okay, so that's a little bit about the situation, and I'll be happy to answer questions later on. And I want to start to talk about the book, and hopefully we'll get to most of the things. Hopefully. So, I don't know if you have pens and paper or something. I think most of you have. I want you to, you know, if you could visualize hope, if you could draw hope, how will that look like? You could take a pen and paper and draw hope. Right. Let's try give it a minute. okay? Or you could do it on your phone, or you could do it in your mind. It doesn't really matter. But try to visualize hope. What is the image of hope? Like if you could draw it, paint it, visualize it, how would that look like? So while you are doing it, I'll say what most people draw, okay? So we need to kind of... So people raise their paper, and there is a sunrise, or some, bright colors, and some bright colors, maybe a rainbow, right? Something bright, something joyful, right? I want to show you what George Watts, painter from the late 19th century. This is how he drew and painted hope. This image is called hope. Not very joyful, right? Not very happy, quite melancholic, right? And if we see, if we look what we have here, we have this probably a female figure sitting on some globe or planet which is almost drowning. Right? She's almost drowning. And her eyes are covered. She doesn't know where she's going. She can't see the future, right? So uncertainty and unpredictability is part of hope for George Watts. And she's playing on a broken down old harp that has only one string. And even this string is kind of shabby looking and maybe it's about to break. And she is listening closely to the soft note, barely audible, of this one broken string on this one broken harp while she's almost drowning. This is hope. Okay? And this is a very accurate portrayal of hope. Because hope is this note, right? This small, we talked about the flame, this small thing that we are looking for while we are in a desperate situation or in bleak times.
If you drew something, you want to show it? You want to erase your piece of paper?
Let's see.
I don't know how to.
Excuse me?
I have to be like Keith Haring, I don't.
Do you want to describe what it is?
Yeah, so I think when I first thought of hope, like you said, I thought of something like elevating, and then I thought of people holding hands, and then light, and then love. So.
Oh. Right. Many times people draw people together, right? Community.
Mm-hmm.
Good. Other people, other drawings? Look at man. Yeah, you erase this. Look at this. Beautiful. Right? Colorful people, right?
Yeah, similar ideas.
Yeah, good. Okay, and a bit different from this.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Okay, but it's good. This. Okay, good.
Better than this one.
Better, yeah. Put that in the museum. Okay. So I'm going to talk about hope, and I'm going to do it while kind of going quickly through some of the chapters of the book, some of them. And chapter 2 is about the merits and the dangers of hope. The dangers of hope. And many times we think of hope, something good, something positive, something we should all have. But many philosophers smarter than myself thought the other way around. They want us to understand that hope also has dangers. So for example, Nietzsche famously said, hope is the worst of our evils. Why? Because it torments and prolongs the torment of man. If we are skeptical, if we are pessimistic, we are good. We are not longing for something, or we don't believe that something is going to happen. So we don't have this pain, this anxiety, right? But if we hope for something really badly, It's also, it generates anxiety and pain and suffering. And also, it could devastate us when these hopes are dashed. So certainly many times hope comes with pain, anguish. Spinoza, Descartes, others said hope is ignorance. Why? Because as people, as humans, we need to aspire for knowledge. We need to know, not hope. We don't need to hope is, how can we base our decisions on hope or life on hope? We need to base our decisions and the way we work and the way we live on knowledge. So aspire for knowledge. Hope is for the ignorant. They could hope, okay? Smart people, they don't hope, they know, okay? And indeed, many times, hope could lead us to pursue unrealistic goals, dismiss the challenges that lie ahead, because we want something so badly, we kind of tend to paint the rosy picture of reality, right? So it could make us unrealistic. So this is another problem. And also, hope is demanding. It's demanding in two ways. It's demanding mentally, because in terms of neuropsychology, hope is a very elaborate and complicated mental construct. And it uses a lot of mental energy, because when we hope, we need to think about the future, think about an alternative future, think about an alternative future that is good, and how we get there. So in terms of mental energy, hope is very demanding. For example, fear is not. There's almost no mental energy that we need to devote when we feel fear. But when we hope, that consumes a lot of mental energy. But also in terms of behavior, because when we hope for something, we are expected to pursue it. So we need to devote time and attention and to pursue our goals. If we are skeptical, we are exonerated from working hard. Right? That can't happen. Peace is impossible. Why work for it? So, it requires commitment and mental energy, and this is something that we like to be lazy. So, we want to avoid being hopeful. Okay, it has being skeptical and pessimistic has many advantages. So, as you see, there are many dangers. So, I hope I convinced you that hope is something bad we need to avoid. Thanks so much for listening, and just kidding. Of course, hope has merits, very powerful merits, okay? And I want to talk about them, and they overshadow the dangers. First of all, many philosophers talk about hope as an existential need of humans. Something that people can't live without. They might want to live without, but they cannot. It's like food and water and sleep. Viktor Frankl, I think you know the name. Viktor Frankl was a survivor of the concentration camps, and he wrote Man's Search for Meaning. And he said that from his observation in the concentration camps, those that lost hope, they was the one who perished. Those who had some hope, even a small one, to have some bread in the evening or something like that, were from those people, those were the ones that were able to survive. So there is a direct connection, at least in the eyes of Viktor Frankl, from hope to survival. A direct connection. Erickson is a developmental psychologist, one of the fathers of developmental psychology, and he shows that hope is one of the first mental constructs that children develop, infants develop. And without developing this construct of hope, this mental construct of hope, other mental constructs they find it hard to develop. So this is a very basic and inherent thing in the people's mind. Others say that hope is something that actually it's a mechanism of survival. Lionel Tiger, he's an evolutionary psychologist. He said, people's overestimation of their success, people overestimate their success, but this is what led people to actually succeed. So in the short run, they might have failed. But their overconfidence in the fact that they will achieve what they want made actually, society progress from, thousands of years until this day. And indeed, think about all the technological developments and all the social advancement that, democracy. What is democracy? This is people hoping that their future well-being is better, that their children or their grandchildren, they hope that the well-being and the situation of their kids will be better. So they want it, they want to change reality, and they get there. So really an evolutionary mechanism and something that progresses people. We don't have wings, right? Humans don't have wings. We're not supposed to fly, but we fly. How is that possible? Because people, looked at the moon or looked at the clouds and said, yeah, we want to be there. They hope to kind of raise from the ground. And through the centuries and the generations, they managed to do it. So hope is something that drives human advancement, technological, social. And last, there are also studies that show that there are objective positive effects of hope. So people that are more hopeful have higher academic achievements, athletic achievements, and actually live longer. So there are also many benefits. And what I try to do in my studies, and a little bit about in this book, and I'll talk at the end about that, is try to find a type of hope that magnifies the benefits and minimizes the disadvantages. Right? We want to find a hope that maximizes and kind of exploits all of that and minimizes as much as possible the drawbacks that we talked earlier. Okay? And if we have time, we'll talk about this. It's called optimal hope. Okay. What is hope? We talked what's good about it, what's bad about it, we don't know what it is. So many psychologists, try to explain what hope is, and there's no consensus. Right? Like scholars, they always argue. No one agrees about anything. Some people look at hope, some psychologists think hope is a cognitive construct, some think it's an emotion, some it's a motivational construct. What I did is went back to common dictionaries, right? Just regular dictionaries. And this is an example from Webster Dictionary, and I did it in many languages. And I always find a similar definition, okay? What is hope? It's a desire accompanied by an expectation or belief in fulfillment. So right away we see that there are actually two components here. The first is a desire. We need to want something, desire, wish, aspire for something. And the second, we need some sort of belief, some sort of expectation that we could achieve this thing that we desire. But there are two things here, right? And indeed, what I show in the book is that these two components, these two dimensions, are the sufficient and essential components of hope. We have to have a wish and some expectation. So I'll give you an example. I'll want to share with you something. I always wanted to be an astronaut. As a kid, I used to open books and look at spaceships and stars and say, yeah, I want to be an astronaut. And by the way, my wishes and desires to be an astronaut are still very, very, very high. But given the fact that, I'm a teacher in university and not a pilot, I don't think that NASA will take me to their ranks now. And also I'm afraid of flights. So my chances to be an astronaut are small, right? So even though I wish to be an astronaut, I don't hope to be an astronaut because my expectations are zero. So when there's no expectation, that nullifies hope. I have only one component, that's not enough. Right? I'll give you another example. Let's say I park in a no parking zone. And I see someone from the municipality giving parking tickets. I might expect to get a parking ticket, right? But I certainly don't hope to get a parking ticket because here my wishes are zero. That's not something I want. So even though I have an expectation, I don't hope because here no wishes nullifies hope. So these two components are always there. Hope is the interplay between these two components. Problem is that everyday use of the word hope in many languages is very confusing. So for example, a good friend of mine told me some years ago, I really, really hope that there will be peace between Israelis and Palestinians, but I have no hope that there will be peace. Now she said, you really hope, but now you have no hope. How could that be? Because in the first part of the sentence, she used it to signify her wishes. I really, really hope, meaning I wish, aspire, desire peace. But I have no hope, meaning there's no chance. My expectations are very low. Right? So this problem that we use hope to sometimes to signify our wishes, sometimes expectations, sometimes some combination of both makes it very hard to measure hope. Right? Because there's a confusion. So what I did is, instead of to solve this confusion, I look at hope as a bidimensional construct. What does it mean? It means it's not unidimensional. It's not that we are low or high in hope. We are somewhere on this bidimensional plane, okay, when we hope. This is the wish dimension, how much we desire and aspire for something. And the more we desire, the higher our hopes, right? The things we desire the most, we hope that they will materialize. And expectation is how much we think, they will materialize. It's more a cognitive construct that assesses the feasibility. And hope increases, from this area until, the darker shades are where the hopes are high. By the way, there's no hope here. Why not? Because this is certainty. When we know something, where our expectations are 100%, we know that something is going to happen, hope is irrelevant. What's most interesting is this place. This place where we want something very badly, but we're really not certain that we could achieve it. And this is relevant for conflicts. For people that are mired in decades of conflict, they want peace in some way or another, but they don't think it's possible. Right? So this is an important place. Also, for example, think about people that have severe illness. Their desires for recovery are very strong, right? And the more they feel sick, the more they want to recover. But their expectations or belief in recovery might be quite small. And this is where hope really matters. Yes, please. Okay, I'm going to just go over this 2 points and then, how much time do we have?
Give it about 5 minutes and then open the floor.
Okay, so 2 quick things. What happens when one dimension biases the other? When there's too much influence between our wishes and expectations? The first thing that might happen is what we call wishful thinking. What's wishful thinking? It's when we desire something so badly, we exaggerate our chances for success. Right? We want something so badly, we kind of tend to dismiss challenges and say, of course I could do it, right? This is hopeful thinking. And this is a problem. The second thing is that our low expectations, the fact that we think that there is very little chance that we'll succeed, it decreases our wishes. So we stop desiring and aspiring for something just because it's hard. Okay? This is the second problem when there's too much connection between these two dimensions. And a second point is the action-oriented. Is hope action-oriented necessarily? Could we hope and be passive? So again, theorists and scholars and thinkers much smarter than me, Eric Fromm, for example, he said, there is no such thing that hope without action. If you just hope for something and do nothing about it, that's not hope. That's something else, but that's not hope. So I also adopt this kind of approach and always look for the action that is connected to this hope. Some sort of behavioral outcome that is connected to hope. Okay, so let's see where we get. I took these ideas, these theoretical ideas, and tried to put them in practice in my empirical studies. So I'm a quantitative guy. I do quantitative studies, I do experiments, and I do large-scale surveys in conflict zones. So I initiated what's called the Hope Map Project. The Hope Map Project measures the levels of hope for peace in conflict zones around the world. And so far, more than 4,800 participants took part in this study. These are representative samples in 2 conflict zones, one Israel-Palestine, one in Cyprus. There's an ongoing conflict in Cyprus between the Turkish Cypriots and the Greek Cypriots. And there were 4 time points where I collected data. And this is the most comprehensive data set on hope for peace, and it's available, you know, if you guys do quantitative studies, the data set is available and you could play around with it. And there were 3 goals for this project. The first is to measure the levels of hope for peace, right? And when I talk about hope, I talk about these 2 dimensions. But the second goal is to see if we could identify determinants of hope. Could we identify factors that influence people to hope? Could we find, for example, demographic factors? Are the old more hopeful than the young? Are the religious more hopeful than the secular? Right? And we could see it across conflicts and studies and societies. And the third is to see if hope matters. What does it mean if hope matters? We could put our measurement of hope and using statistical models, see if it has any effect on, for example, people's policy preference. Right? Does hope matter? Maybe it doesn't matter at all. So, what you're going to see now is the levels of hope for peace among Israelis and Palestinians. This is data collected in 2019, so it's not that up to date, but still not very long. This is Israel. This is from 500 people, and this is a representative sample. We can see that most of the people are here. Remember this corner? People desire peace, but think it is impossible. And this is, by the way, you know, peace could mean many things, right? So here the definition was, how much do you wish for a peace that addresses the needs of both peoples, and how much do you expect peace that addresses the needs of both peoples to materialize? And so we see that the wishes are high, but the expectations are low. There's some people that don't wish for peace. And we see it also that, we see that across definitions there are some people that are indifferent to this idea of peace. And some people are here quite optimistic, but not many. So most of the people are. This is Palestinians from the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. Okay? And by the way, it is very hard to collect data, this kind of representative sample, in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, but you know, pollsters would go to refugee camps and cities and villages and collect the data. Still, most of the observations are here. But there's also a spread here and a spread here. And when I compare the means, when I look and compare the means, there's a very interesting phenomena that always shows across the 4 times I collected data. The desires for peace among Israelis and Palestinians are high and identical. They are identical. Meaning that the aspirations, again, I'm not talking about behavior, but the aspirations of people, the desires, the wishes for a peace that addresses the needs of both people is high, is about here, and similar. The expectations, by the way, are different, and Palestinians are more optimistic about the chances for peace. So they are more in this direction. Okay, maybe we'll just end here with this slide. Okay. Across societies, both Israelis, Palestinians, and Turkish and Greek Cypriots, we see that age matters, such that the older people are, the more they wish and expect peace to materialize. And together with Beatrice Hasler, my colleague, she did very exceptional experiment. We took students in the university, made them put VR glasses, and they saw themselves as old people. So they look at themselves and they saw themselves as 80-year-olds. And other students put the glasses and saw themselves as their own age. And then a day afterwards, we asked them how much they wish and expect peace. And those who saw themselves as the older selves had higher wishes and expectations for peace. So being old is not only a political issue or a historical issue, it's the fact that older people are more hopeful, have higher wishes and expectations for peace. I'll just end with this finding. We also asked Israelis and Palestinians, how much do you think the other group wishes and expect peace? What are your estimations of the hope for peace of your enemy? And what did we see? We see that there is an underestimation. So both groups underassess their rivals' hope for peace. Okay? And we also see that this underassessment affects their own hope. So people say, they don't hope for peace, why should I hope? But their estimation, their initial estimation is wrong. It's underestimated. Okay, so we won't go into this because I've talked too much, and we'll open the floor, and if we'll have time, we'll go back to the let's see, this, okay. Okay, so this is the time for questions, and if we want, we could go back to the other slides.
Alrighty, questions? Nothing, you guys are quiet. Oh, in the back, George Quintiva.
Yeah, it was a great presentation, though I came late for a great presentation, so just a faculty on the other department.
Ah, wow, welcome.
Yeah, I've studied Nietzsche, and as you know, that for quite some time, but the approach is really based on the situation of the time. So I came to the conclusion that's why the approach was kind of negative. But if I look at the last piece that you gave here, my question is now looking in terms of both parties, Israeli and Palestinian. And I just want to know now, not to get an old population, but the younger one. Do we see any effort in terms of crisscrossing, engaging talks? Because sometimes they want to make a difference. The elder died, the past is done, this is done, that, but it's up to us not to forge a new future. If there's any kind of crisscrossing in terms of ideas, sharing between young Palestinians and Israelis.
Well, unfortunately not, and on the contrary. So if there are, what we see that if, again, these are exceptional times because of the war, etc., but for example, before, most of the participants in dialogue groups or in binational initiatives of all sorts are not young. The younger are more cynical, they are more skeptical, they are more nationalistic. And I agree with you, that's a problem, because they are the future. If anyone should be engaged in anything, and, you know, if we want to see some advancement, this is supposed to be the young generation. So this is a problem, and we see it also in the research. We see that the younger people are, you know, completely skeptical about the chances for peace, and also their desires are, on the desire dimension, also not high. And I also agree with you about the philosophers, right? So they were, they were mad about the world. Yeah. Nietzsche was mad, yeah. Yeah, please.
I'm going to go back to your initial discussion about Israel currently. You mentioned that the population is quite upset about the fact that this government is in place at this moment. Could you say something about that? Could you?
Yeah, so first of all, it's not everyone, right? So it's not everyone, but it's certainly, I'll talk a little bit about what was happening before the war, so we will know the context. So, for about 8 months, there was a huge protest and uprising against the government, with accusations of corruption, and mainly a great fear that basic democratic values are being infringed, and policies and other legislation is anti-democratic, mainly weakening the judicial system. But this is not all. The interesting thing is that though this government was able to have a majority of vote, it was democratically elected, also people that voted for this government, goodbye Paul, thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Also people that voted for this government started to feel, negatively about what was going on. Now this is not across the board, and there was still, if we're talking about percentages, it was about 35, before the war, 35% still supported the government, about 65 opposed it, and there were also, and there were also some people that were undecided. But after the war began, the support for Netanyahu dropped, the prime minister. The support for the government dropped. Many held him responsible for what happened, of course, not directly responsible, but indirectly responsible. And the response of the government was so poor. We're talking about not only the military that failed to arrive at the scene, this is another thing, but all the government ministries that are supposed to deal with, times of crisis, they're not responding and still not responding. The Ministry of Finance is supposed to allocate money and funding for this thing, wasn't responding for 3 weeks. Really failed government, and this dropped the support. And also people saw that civil society is stepping in. Okay, and this is very, something that I need to say that again, within this very tragic event, this is something that I'm very proud of. People, stepped in, shoulder to shoulder, almost from all walks of life and all sectors of society contributed to that. I will say that the protest movement was kind of leading this. This was one of the beautiful things. So even though many people kind of engaged the protest movement, they were the ones that were arranging and coordinating this. What will happen? We don't know. I have to say that many times conflict creates like a tendency for people to go more to the right, more to nationalistic sentiment, more religious, even extreme religious views. So it could be the case that Netanyahu will still be in power. It could be that right-wing parties, even right to the Likud party, will gain much more power. It's also a scenario because conflict usually, and now of course there is all the anger is directed at the Palestinians. So it could also be the case, but it could also be the case that a more moderate government will replace the current government. It has Benny Gantz, for example, which is one of the leaders of the opposition parties. He has the strongest support in terms of being the prime minister. Yeah, please.
You said that among the young, they're the ones who the most negative. How do you change that? How do you talk to the young and get them to change their ideas on both sides?
Yeah, so first of all, of course, this is very, very difficult, but I'll tell you how I see it. the battle, there's the battlefront with guns but another battlefront is the battlefront of public discourse, of media, and how that is framed. And we live in an age where public discourse could be easily manipulated, all right? And the issue is not to leave that area, this field of public discourse in a vacuum, and say, people are thinking, no, the way we talk, the way we frame things is, eventually becomes how people frame and think. And we live in an age of, hyper media consumption, social media, tweets, TikToks, whatever. If we think that, so we don't convince people, right? The issue, I think the approach is to convince people is not the approach, or to talk to people. The thing is how to frame, in the public discourse, in the media, both traditional and social media, how to frame the reality such that it will be more conducive to conflict resolution. And I could give you all sorts of examples, for example, how I and other researchers that also do applied work to it. Yeah, please.
I think it's also, in a sense, it's also actions. On the West Bank, the right-wing settlers are destroying Palestinian homes. If there were a way to get rid of these settlers and force them back and give the land back to the Palestinians, that might go part of the way to changing the minds of the Palestinians.
Yeah, so definitely I have to just to kind of keep people on the same page, now in the West Bank, right, which is the larger territory of the Palestinians, where most of the Palestinians live, there's also a horrible situation.
Absolutely.
Because, again, right-wing nationalism is on the rise, and there is violence both from settlers on Palestinians and the military. I think about 140 Palestinians were killed in the West Bank in the 4 weeks, in the last 4 weeks. Some of them militia members, some of them are civilians, so it depends. But definitely the situation is very bad. The problem is, of course, that they are in government, the settlers. They are part of the government, and they have a big...
Yeah, I think get rid of this government. I think.
Well, yeah, so... Yeah, please.
Well, so Jay, you kind of started it. The question I was going to ask was slightly more technical. When you look at the West Bank and when you look at Gaza, do you see, I won't ask whether you see hope for, positive outcomes, but do you see different potential strategies in light of the different outlooks of people in the West Bank versus Gaza?
Yeah, so first we could look at this, it's a great question, and we could look at this from several angles, okay? So first of all, currently we are, it's like think of that we are now in a car crash, okay? We are now, we Israelis, Palestinians, perhaps you guys also because you are interested in this topic, we are in a car and it's crashing. As we are speaking, it is crashing. There are casualties all the time. As we speak, people are dying. Israelis, Palestinians, there are missiles. I live in Tel Aviv, right? I live in Tel Aviv, which is about an hour and a half drive from the Gaza Strip. We have sirens once or twice a day. Okay, so I'm at home with the kids, we hear the sirens, we have 90 seconds to be in the sheltered room. We go to the sheltered room, we wait, we hear the explosions. You hear the explosions clearly. It's easy to hear the explosions. Usually it's mid-air because it's intercepted in mid-air with Iron Dome. But kids in Tel Aviv hear explosions on a daily basis, right? As you go near the Gaza Strip, people hear it, 100 times a day. In Gaza Strip, it's hell. It's hell. Okay, so we are now in the car crash. And what you do many times when you are crashing is you protect yourself, you kind of brace yourself, right? And it's important to brace yourself. And in this circumstance, embracing yourself means keeping a clear conscience, not going to extremes, understanding there are complexities, this is what. Then starting to think about the day after, right? Because we are also want to say what happens after the car is crashed. We crashed into the wall, the crash is done, now we go step out of the car and we are wounded. How do we mend these wounds, right? What do we do with, okay? And this distinction is important because many times we think, okay, we want a solution now, but we are crashing. But when we will think about this idea of stepping out of the car and then tending to your wounds and building yourself. Perhaps out of this catastrophe, a very clear understanding, this is an understanding that I hold for many years, but many Israelis and Palestinians don't, that solution, not a military solution, but a solution, diplomatic solution to somehow arrange, that the two peoples would live, so in some configuration would live in the area between the river and the sea, is a must, and there is no other. Okay? And from that standpoint, then everything evolves. So it could be, for example, and now people are talking that Palestinian Authority, a more moderate Palestinian force, will step into the Gaza. It was actually, beaten out in 2017. It will step in and start to administer. Okay. By the way, speaking about the current government, one of the aims, even explicit aims of the current government, was to weaken moderate voices in the Palestinian society, to weaken them. Because if they were strong, then somehow some peace, some agreement would be made, and the current government wants to hold to the West Bank at any price. Okay, but perhaps again, if this government is down, and then a more moderate government in Israel, okay, will then work with the Palestinian Authority as a more moderate voice. This is one. Okay. And then from this point on, you can talk about the two-stage solution, or you can talk about confederacy, or all sorts of. Okay.
So what's the guess? What's the assessment? So what are the chances now for either or, one way or another?
So, what people mistake the fact that I study hope, think that I have hope. Or I know, or like, is there hope for peace? Yes or no? Okay. I don't know. I'm not a prophet, I'm not a prophet. I could say two things, and again, I don't think I'm saying anything that people don't, all of you understand. What we said now, what this scenario of rebuilding from the ashes, right? The two societies, right? Have suffered so much and understand and come to this understanding that some sort of coexistence is needed, a just and sustainable coexistence in the Middle East is needed. This is one scenario. However, we also need to acknowledge that there is also a bleak scenario where now these sentiments are going to make people more extreme. Currently, and I know from Israelis and Palestinians as well, currently the sentiment is so negative, because the losses are so real, and again, the levels of cruelty and the numbers are so extreme, that people, they don't think about these things at all, about positive. They think about, it's us or them. It's like there's no coexistence here whatsoever. And so we could also see this really heightened violence going on. This is also a scenario. And there is this middle ground, not here, not there, which has been going for a while. So, yeah.
Alrighty, I think it's a good place to stop the conversation and start another conversation, a more informal one. Oded is not going anywhere, he'll stay here until tomorrow morning. in this room, so there's no rush.
I have a sleeping bag here.
Yeah, absolutely, he has nowhere to go tonight.
Okay. So I'm here and the questions and
Please join me in thanking Oded Leshem.
Thanks so much for coming. You could scan this. If you want to keep in contact with me, scan this, and this leads to my website, and you have more information about Hope and my studies. Students are very, very welcome to contact me for your research, theses, papers that you write. I collaborate and work with students all the time and publish with them, so you are welcome to.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming, folks. Thank you.